Hey everyone, welcome to Flavor Talk with the BBQ Pro Shop Factory Team. I'm co-host Brian Neal, aka Mr. Freak of Smoke Freaks Barbecue.
Hey everyone, I'm Ann Neal, Ms. Freak, and together we are the tongues and testers of the BBQ Pro Shop Flavor Guide, the world's first online seasonings decoder and buying guide. And joining us is our partner in flavor going all the way back to 2019, Mr. Jeff Belmonte, owner
Hi, everybody.
of Pro Shop. Hey Jeff, what's up?
Not much. Happy to be here tonight.
Staying warm?
It's warm in here.
Everyone looks warm. Well, the theme of tonight's episode, everyone, is winning. And we are joined by the two winningest people in the Steak Cookoff Association, Tim and Sandy Brown of Stress Relief Barbecue. Ms. Freak and I met Tim and Sandy back in 2017 in a grassy field back in Belvedere, Illinois. And ever since then, we've been great friends, fierce competitors. They've been our steak mentors and our barbecue family. Hey, Tim. Hey, Sandy. How you doing tonight?
Hey, guys.
We're doing well.
Trying to keep warm.
Right on. And where are you joining us from tonight?
We are joining you from our house, actually, in Rockford, Illinois.
Yes,
For once they're at home. All
Yeah,
right.
for once we're at home.
Once we're at home. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. I know you just got home from a big weekend of competition. And since the theme is all about winning tonight, I'd like to just start by filling everyone in on some of the winning that Tim and Sandy have done. And this is just some of the winning that Tim and
I
Sandy
think Jeff's got some photos to show as you go. So cue them up. Let's go.
Tim and Sandy together have combined for 3 State Cookoff Association USA Championships. Along the way, 95 combined SCA wins and more than 600 combined top 10s. In fact, Tim is the winningest man in the SCA with 55 career wins. Sandy's right behind him as the second winningest person in the SCA with 40 wins. And both have achieved perfect scores in steak, including on the same day at the same event. That's why we call them the perfect couple. And Sandy, this picture over here on the right, is one of the only 2 people with a perfect score in the SCA in steak and in the ancillary category.
I mean, wow, it really is a lot of winning consistently over a period of 7 consecutive years. And, you know, no matter how simple Tim makes it sound when he's coaching up a newbie or Sandy makes it sound when she's teaching a class, the reality is it takes a lot to operate and achieve at that level, contest after contest, year after year. So tonight, our goal is to unbox Tim and Sandy to learn a little bit about what makes them tick and how they've managed to be so successful. Truly, guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight. And shall we commence with the unboxing? Are you ready to do this?
Sounds good.
Oh, I'm a little scared now.
No need to
It
be
sounded better than dissecting. I was trying to come up with a word, and I'm like, what word?
No need to be scared, except for we're going to start with a little walk down memory lane to showcase your debut in competitive cooking. So, Jeff, that's the next photo. Here's a snap from the weekend we met you back in 2017. So tell us, guys, where are we? Where are we all? What are you doing? What do you remember about that day?
We are in Belvedere, Illinois, which is about 20 minutes from our house. So it was really close to home. It was our first KCBS event. We had absolutely no idea what we were doing. I will say, actually, when we got to the event, Brian was already set up with the Wolfmobile, and we set up, and I think right next to him, because we thought we only had, you know, the 10 by 10 or 10 by 20 space or whatever. So like we butted right up to you guys. We had no idea what we were doing, but we had such fun that weekend, and we met so many great people, including the Smoke Freaks, and they had their music going and they had howling going, and there was so much fun. And we got a call. We got a call in chicken. 8th place, and we were hooked. And after the event, Ann came to me and says, "Do you know how to read the score sheet?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." And you go, oh, good, there's a comment card. We had a comment card. I don't remember what it was, but Anne took the time to explain how the scorecard worked, how it worked, kind of in the KCBS world. And we had a blast. And I think that year we did 4 or 5 events. Yeah. When you get a call your first time out, you are truly hooked.
So I believe in that picture on the left, that's pretty much the entirety of your setup, as I remember it. You had a homemade sign, a brand new pop-up, a brand new pretty much Jambo sitting there, and some totes. And that was about it.
And a borrowed pickup that we could sleep in the back of my friend's back truck. So
is that the truck right back there? I remember you sleeping in a truck.
I do. I remember you guys or Tim, I remember you sleeping in the truck, and I remember thinking, wow, he's sleeping in that truck, man. They're serious. Like, that's hardcore, sleeping in the truck, Yeah,
I remember you came out early in the morning. I'm sitting in my chair watching the fire, and you wanted to make sure I was awake. I'm like, trust me, I'm awake. I'm just sitting here zoned out.
So he was taking union breaks
back all the way back then.
Who knew? Yes, who knew? All right, let's do another photo. Jeff, can you show us the next one? This is a couple of months later. Seriously, a couple of months later. What is the deal with this photo, guys?
This was
Winthrop Harbor.
Winthrop Harbor. If Smoke Freaks had their first grand, I believe. Yep. And we were RGC. We had a first place brisket.
And they had first place in every other category.
They had first place in every other category. And we had first place brisket and won RGC. And at that event, we actually had bought our trailer ready. It was the first time we bought a toy hauler, a camper, and we had a brand new truck, and the truck broke down, so we had to borrow a truck. It was just
started out on the wrong foot.
Like, it was raining, the wood got wet, like we thought it was just going to be this miserable cook, type of thing, and we had a great time, and it was just a really special memory. I actually have that picture framed on my desk.
That's one of my favorites as well. Well, let's roll back a little bit. I want to talk just a little bit about really what made you guys decide to enter a KCBS contest of all things. I mean, competitive cooking, yes. Why KCBS? I guess close to home, but man, most people don't show up for their first one with a Jambo. So how did we get from wherever you started to that point?
So a little bit of background. When I got divorced, I didn't know how to cook back in 2007. And there was a local store, and they were doing barbecue classes during the summer every other Monday. And they would teach you how to buy a loin, break it down, how to do an appetizer and a dessert. And I just thought it was great because I would get to eat every other week, So before the Jambo, there was a couple other smokers that appeared at our house, and one was a Myron Mixon H2O smoker, M36. But you needed, 8 of your best friends to move that. So we knew that it wasn't very portable, and we wanted to we were kind of hooked at that point of doing that. So that's where the Jambo came in. We were going to buy one.
It was more portable. That's awesome.
Definitely more portable. It got towed behind our Jeep at the time.
Oh, that's great. Well, Jeff, can you throw that last picture up again real quick? So, all right, it's been 4 months. You're already on the RGC stage.
One more.
All right, the logo has progressed a lot in 4 months. You've got a real logo and shirts, apparel made already. So over the years since, how many different versions of barbecue apparel have you had?
Actually, that logo has been the same.
We got the square and the rectangle.
Yeah, I mean, we just basically have the rectangle mode and we have the square mode. Funny thing is, we are actually working with a graphic designer, and we're going to be changing it up slightly. It will still always be stress relief, but changing kind of the logo around. But
big deal, rebranding.
Yeah. Once Tim and I kind of say, hey, this is something we're going to do, we go in all in. You have to get all the equipment. You got to get all the logos, the branding. We love to learn, so we love to take classes. We took tons of classes. So once we're into something, we are into it.
So that's a theme, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Make a commitment Go ahead, Brian. Yep.
No, go 4 times out in KCBS. Now you've already knocked down a reserve grand. It really doesn't happen that often. And I think that's because it's not that easy to show up in a big field, set up a kitchen, and turn in 4 things in 90 minutes. I mean, most people can't do that at all. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to get into this and learn to do it. It takes a few repetitions before, you really get that down to where out of a field of 30 or 40 people, all of a sudden you're up there at the top. It took us twice as long to get to our first RGC. And frankly, I know teams that have been at it for close to a decade that still haven't done it. So just for folks who don't know competition cooking, it's a big deal to get up there that quick. So let me just ask, had either of you guys already gotten a taste for winning before you got into competitive cooking and started dominating that?
Go ahead.
You know what? It was funny because I was thinking about that. Growing up, I wasn't really into sports. You know, I wasn't part of any sports teams, types of things. I was a competitive person, like board games and things like that, but not really like organized competition type of thing. But I did back in 2011, 2012, started to go to a gym to lose weight. We were getting married, so you needed to look good in a wedding dress, and started working out at a small gym. And the gym owner whispered in my ear one time, "You should think about competitive bodybuilding." And I'm like, there's no way I'm ever gonna, do that. And then again, six months later, 8 months later, there I am, doing competitive bodybuilding in the figure competition. So slash between bodybuilding and pageantry, kind of, in between. So, and again, that was a sport we got all in. We have a full gym downstairs. Don't utilize it as much as we do when we get into barbecue. But yeah, that was really between bodybuilding and now barbecue and steak. I think Tim was a little bit more into sports and competitiveness and teams than I was.
Right.
Yeah. What kind of competing did you do back in the day?
Oh, you name it. Used to play on 3 softball leagues at a time, so you name it, I did it, race snowmobiles, all kinds of things like that.
So you both had some competitive, aspects about your personalities through sports, through competitive bodybuilding, and, launching into competitive cooking via KCBS, but in time making that pivot from barbecue KCBS into the steak world. And we'd love to talk a little bit about that transition from that space. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about that?
So on Friday nights at KCBS contest, a lot of people are prepping their meats, and then a lot of people are just kind of hanging out and, kind of talking to the competitors and having a beer. Well, they started coming around this SCA and they said, hey, for $100, you can enter this contest to win $1,000. Well, I thought it was a scam. They came up to me 3 or 4 different times to contest, and I'm just like, no way. So Sandy finally said, hey, I want to do this. And so obviously she jumped in and had great immediate success in it. And I think it was your 5th contest or fourth contest. Damon and Lou Holter put on a contest in the Twin Cities,
Minneapolis,
St. Paul, at the old beer factory, the Smith's Beer Factory, and it was a $5,000 first place, right? And so all the big SCA people were there that we had no clue who, like Johnny Joseph or anybody like that was. And I told her, I said, oh, it's 5.5 hours. If you're going to go up there, I'll compete, but I don't want to rain on your parade.
Because it was a long drive. 5 hours was a really long drive competition.
We blink at that now. But anyway, we went there, and in the contest, I was very fortunate. I got a 3rd place call, and then they turned around and said, Tim Brown from Rockford gets the golden ticket. So in front of all these people in this crowd, I turned around and said, what's the golden ticket? I had no clue. So we were hooked after that.
So what is the golden ticket, just for the uninitiated here?
Yeah, so the golden ticket's like the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It gives you that, ticket to go to Fort Worth, and the Worlds are now in March. They used to be in October, but now you get to go in March, and it's an entrance to compete in the steak level, and you can now get World Championship. So you can have one for steak, and you can also earn one for ancillary also.
Gotcha.
Excellent.
So when was that you got your first golden ticket?
2018.
2018.
2018.
2018.
And that was my very first contest.
Gotcha. And then was the pivot into steak pretty much immediately, or did you dabble around in both for a while?
So
We might
I
have
think
crossed over.
the plan was kind of for 2019, going into 2019, we were going to do like 7 or 8 KCBS, 7 or 8 SCA, kind of half and half, type of thing. And we started the year kind of with SCA. We were, we hit success kind of early on, and then we did 1 or 2 KCBS, and then we realized like, hey, we're better steak cooks than we are KCBS cooks. And also from where we live in Northern Illinois, it's hard sometimes to source all the meats that you need for KCBS.
It
We
is.
don't have a lot of barbecue shops and things.
It's hard
like
no matter where you live.
And it was before Barbecue Pro Shop was online. So, like where to get seasonings and things like that. And so it made it really difficult. And it was, a full week worth of prep that you had to do. Injections on Monday and sauces on Tuesday. And,
Well, Wednesday shuffle.
Exactly. And so what we were finding with SCA, hey, we don't have to get our own steaks, and we could load up the truck in about an hour, it was, and at that time there was actually quite a number of them in the Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa type of radius. So kind of in 19, we actually did more and became successful. And then the goal was kind of like, hey, I think we could hit the top 25. When we went into 2018, when we went to Worlds, we saw the top 25 go on stage. And so we kind of had that in our mind going, hey, that'd be really cool if we can do that. And
Sounds like a goal.
It sounds like a goal.
Yeah. Which sounds like an amazing opportunity for Jeff to put up the next photo. Speaking of goals, when I think about the concept of winning and mindset, the names Tim and Sandy Brown just naturally come to mind. And here are some quotes from your bio, and I'd love for you to each elaborate on these 2 themes, if you could.
Yeah, I think the first one was a Sandy quote.
Sandy,
we are very goal oriented. We're both IT professionals, so we're very detailed, like lists and so forth, right? We like to know, kind of even, we're both longtime programmers. We don't program anymore, but you kind of think through like, okay, what do you want to accomplish, type of thing. And so in the SCA world and even in KCBS, we set goals like, okay, what do we want to accomplish? Our first goal in SCA was to hit that top 25 in 2019, which we did. Actually, we both overachieved that one. We were 7th and 8th, type of thing. But we've set out goals each year, kind of what we want to do, what we want to accomplish. And our goals change from year to year and sometimes even halfway through the year. I will say this past year, 2024, I will be honest, I didn't have a really strong steak goal. I've accomplished a lot. There's 1 or 2 more things I want to accomplish with steak, but didn't have a strong goal. But halfway through the year, I started doing ancillary and then started building some goals on ancillary. I wanted to be number 1 in Illinois in ancillary. Then it's like, hey, a win would be really, really cool. And then I realized like, hey, I'm getting close to the top 25, right? Perfect score wasn't even on my bingo sheet, for ancillary. So, but I think setting that goal and we have a lot of discussions. We're in the car a lot. So we do talk to each other a lot in the car. And that's when we talk about the goals, like the last North Carolina for the end of the year. And even for the shed now, we start talking about, okay, what do we want to accomplish for 2025? And then we plan our year around that.
I can't tell you how many times, probably at least 4, maybe 5, where one of you guys has told me early in the year about your goals for the year, and then you go out and do exactly that. And I'm guessing that has something to do with the second quote up on that board. So, Tim, why don't you take that one and tell us a little bit about how you go about achieving these goals you set for yourself.
Yeah, like Sandy said, our jobs, I'm a very logical person. That's what I deal with every day is data and logic. So I have to understand, really how things perform, what's going to happen, what it takes to get there. It starts with a checklist, right? I need to make sure you have the basic equipment, make sure we have our charcoal and chimneys and string and knives sharpened and all that kind of stuff loaded in the truck. Or if we're taking the trailer, whatever we're taking, make sure we have that kind of stuff. And then on the way down there, I always go back to when we were doing bodybuilding. There was a lady named Brenda Ray. She was a 7-time world champion. And she used to tell us, she could, when she showed up to a big competition like a world, she couldn't tell you how many competitors were or who was in that. She never looked at it. It's all about yourself, right? It's you turning in that steak against 5 judges, right? And so it doesn't matter if Sandy's there because, people don't understand. Sandy and I compete against each other every single week that we compete. And so when Ann shows up or Brian shows up, and I always tell everybody lately is that any person in the SCA can win. It's very difficult to win in the SCA just because the competition level has increased so much. The number of rubs have increased and the marinades and all of those types of things. Learning curve has stepped up because of online classes, because of Tim and Sandy classes, because of other people's classes. People don't have to just go out like we did and experiment on their own to make this happen. So I try to bring all that together. And, I probably spend more time on the backside coming home, like, hey, what went wrong? Like, how, like a lot of people say, oh, look at my steak. And it was really pretty when they turn it in. And all of a sudden they got a 47 in appearance. Well, they don't know what happened with that judge or the cutter when they turned it in. So I try to analyze that like, oh, did I cook too big of a try and it flipped out? So always trying to, prepare for those kind of things and stuff like that. And then just keep going, try to go back to the basics because certain times I take myself off that path and I'm like, okay, how do I get back? And I'll ask Sandy, I'm like, hey, I did this last week. And it'll be like, why? What did you do? And you always have to take that step back, go back to basic, goes back to your roots and where it got you.
Very interesting. Well, all of it certainly adds up and works. Jeff, let's go to the next one and see the results of all that. So for those of you who aren't on phones, you'll probably see this better than the ones on the small screen, but hey, turn it sideways. You can probably read this. What this is basically Tim and Sandy's data sheet from the past 7 years here.
So I update this every week.
We can see their batting average every single year, how they've gone up and down over that time, their average rankings. But Sandy, how about this? Why don't you tell us the story of Tim's progression and then we'll let him describe yours. That sound fun?
Yeah, sure.
That's great.
Like you said, in 2018, I really was the one who started being more interested in doing the state comps on Friday. He was a lot involved, getting the pit ready for KCBS. And, I had more time and I showed a little bit more interest in it. He wound up, though, at that very first comp, like we said, it was a long drive, 5 hours. So he decided to cook, and that's how he got his golden ticket. And then kind of, in 2019, we were both kind of feeling it out. And he'll always say, this is more my deal than his deal. He was coming along. We were doing it together, but it was something I think I enjoyed a little bit more. Our good friend Matt Overson won the points championship in 2019. So then 2020 came about and Tim says, okay, Sandy, you're going to go for it. And I went and then we're like, okay, next year it's your turn, and so it was, it was Tim's turn. And then kind of in 2022, it was kind of a flip between who was going to get it, him and I, and going through.
One big thing happened.
And then Tim was diagnosed with cancer at the end of the year. And that really slowed him down and changed his perspective of things. But then in 23, we still competed. He was very focused on winning and getting that going. And then in 24, we thought we were going to kind of slow down a little bit, and we did. If you look at the number of comps, we did less. But Tim entered the year in 2024 with a goal of hitting 50 career wins. He had most number of wins for the season in both 21 and 23.
Correct.
And then so in 24, he kind of had that goal, but more importantly, he had that goal of he wanted 50 wins. The beginning of the year, he was still kind of starting to get his strength back from the cancer treatments. He started the year off with a win at the Shed, and then it was kind of slow. And then in the summertime, he just took off, and he started feeling really well, and hit the 50 mark, and then overachieved, of course, and had to get 55 wins, career wins, which led him to the 12 wins for the season. So Tim, I think, has been, his goals have always been more focused on number of wins, type of deal. And that's where you see, kind of his progression and his thought process.
Well, the ranking column on the far right is certainly impressive. It's double digit every year. So we got
single digit.
Single digit. Second, first, second, third, and fourth. Yeah. That's just insane. I mean, if you look at the barbecue world, I mean, nobody does that there, because you can't. And somehow, I mean, both of you have done it. So, Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about Sandy's rap sheet up there?
Yeah, I think she alluded to a little bit. We, in 2019, we started kind of cooking here in the Midwest, and we formed the alliance. And by accident, it was coined by Sandy. But the Midwest Five, because every week we were out with Matt, Mark Huntley, Troy Johnson, Jeff Jacobson, us. Did I miss somebody?
Doc Johnson.
Doc Johnson. Sorry, Doc. Don't mean to exclude you. So we were very fortunate that the five of us finished in the top 10. And that was unheard of. Everybody that cooked was, and was placing in the World Championships were basically Texas and Oklahoma. And then here come these Midwest cooks, and it was a big deal. So Matt won that championship, and at the same time, we came back home just like we are now. Back in the winter there, and we were just kind of sitting here and like setting our goals. And I think Sandy alluded to it. It's like, why not? Why can't we? And I always say that Sandy's the better cook, and she is the better cook. I just get lucky a few times. She understands probably a little bit more of the process, when it takes a little bit. And she also cooks with love. That's the one thing that Sandy does. She even has this, made with love. So that is a big thing. So when she set that goal in 2020, it was all out for that. We did a lot of driving that year. We did a lot of contests. And people say, oh, the only reason you won the points championship because you drove a lot. Well, and you entered a lot of contests. You only get 1 point. So when you end up with a record number of 563 points and you entered 125 contests, take those 125 away, where the other 450 points come from, right? You earned all those. So you have to have a very diverse, or a very balanced profile that shows up and can cook in the Midwest area, can cook in the Memphis area, in the South, and Texas and Florida, in North Carolina where we cook, and come away with walks. Oh, and also Australia and New Zealand. Our profile has gone out to all of those. So Sandy set that goal. Obviously, she was the first lady to do that. 2-time female of the year. Plus, she won that points ring and stuff like that. Next year, the SCA changed. Instead of being a points race, they tried to balance it out with the averages. And so I was fortunate enough to get the average, there of the placement. And then, like I said, next year we kind of, like Sandy mentioned, really wasn't either one of us. We just were out there cooking. We knew we were very competitive and wanted to go on. And then about in June, obviously, I got the devastating news. So it basically was Sandy's to kind of run away with. I did my support. I did the one thing that Johnny Joseph always says, you don't just show up, to donate, right? And I did, because I was trying to help drive, trying to help be there, or whatever. So Sandy was fortunate; she was still, in the mindset where I was not, right? So
I believe though you finished second for the year.
I did.
So I think
it wasn't terrible.
But there's also too, because we do it so often and we were cooking so much, there's also muscle memory, type of thing. And those who have seen us cook, there's been times that Tim, this is not our full-time job, and our full-time jobs have nothing to do with cooking or food. We're both IT professionals, but times Tim has had stressful weeks at work. There's times that Tim has been on the phone when we're cooking. And I say sometimes those are the times he cooks the best, because he's not overthinking the steak piece of it, and he really lets that muscle memory kind of come into play. And that really came into play for Tim at the end of 2022 when he was going through his treatments. It was really muscle memory. It was a good distraction for him.
Yeah, treatment.
And I'm sure all of the treatments and everything else took up a ton of time. And yet, you know, you guys oftentimes, I mean, I remember times you're someplace Friday night cooking. I assume your jobs require you to be around at least some of the time. So, I mean, how did you guys manage to juggle that where you'd be sometimes even maybe 2 or 3 different places in a weekend while holding down a job? Just logistically, how'd you do it?
So COVID changed the world, right? COVID allowed both myself and plus many other people to work remote. So a lot of times what we do, we stage ourselves on a Thursday night. We'll leave the house at 4:30, 5 o'clock. If we're going to Texas, we'll go to Poplar Bluff, Missouri. It's about 7 hours. Get in there about midnight. We work a half a day from the hotel, and then we can finish driving in the other 6 or 7 hours. So we do that a lot if we're in Arkansas, or even in the Memphis area, we'll go to Cape Girardeau. So it's all about staging ourselves and then to be able to work Friday morning remote from the hotel and stuff like that. And then, as Sandy alluded to, there's a lot of times I'm taking calls. We were just out in North Carolina, and it's my busiest week of the year as I have to close all the books, load pricing, load costing, cost rolls. And it really is a very tough time, stressful time for me. But we made time when you go on maybe a little bit of limited sleep to do it. So.
And that was the thing, is in 2019 and 20 and probably 21, we were doing what I call crazy drives.
Crazy.
Friday night, we would compete at one place, drive overnight to compete someplace on Saturday, and sometimes an overnight on Sunday, an overnight to get to someplace on Sunday. And, both of us drive. And at the time, there was quite a lot of us doing those crazy drives. So there was driving down the road at 2 a.m. and you're on the phone, you're on the phone with Mark Huntley, keeping you awake. For the last couple of years, I said to him, I'm like, no, we would sleep in rest areas. And I'm like, no overnight crazy drives. Like, I want to compete. I want to do this, but we're getting older. I want none of these crazy drives. So really, I think we just did one somewhat crazy job this year. I did one by myself. And you did a crazy job.
I think that's a really good point, is to talk about the reality of, the driving and the traveling. And you've already identified some ways that you make use of that time. There's a photo, Jeff, if you could put
number
that.
10.
Number 10, the next one, being on the road as much as you guys. Here's some big smiles, at least from Sandy, right? On the left, and you see, a lot of corn in this particular photo. That's a grind, all those miles. How do you avoid that burnout? How do you stay motivated?
I think the years that we were doing the crazy drives, we were really motivated to win. Yep. We really had that motivation of, we want to win the championship. This is what it takes. This is what we're going to do. And we're very lucky. We have 2 of us, right? So we have 2 drivers right away, type of thing. Tim does probably much more of the driving than I do. But it is tiring, and there's a lot of sacrifices, right? There's a lot of family events, friend events, that we've missed. My family isn't in Illinois; they're in New Jersey and Georgia and things like that, and we missed going to see them, sometimes because we're on that road, and it got to be a lot, right? So I would say for in 2024, we're still want to be competitive, we want to cook, but we want to take the time. There was a weekend that I went back to New Jersey with my mom, and Tim drove down to Alabama and competed, right? We would have never done that in 2021, 22 when we were chasing hard. But it was like, okay, now, we've accomplished a lot. Again, we're still competitive, and we go like, yes, we're having fun. Like, I love hashtags and playing with hashtags, right? Competitors still having fun. When you go to an event, we go to compete. You don't go to donate. We go to events, and we love seeing our SCA family and having a great time. But that's not the reason why we go to that event. We go to that event to win. Right. If you're going to an event just to like, hey, I want to see everybody, see how everybody's doing, well, then go invite your friends in your backyard.
Yeah, buy a pontoon boat. Have a party.
Exactly. We are going to competitions to win.
Yep.
That is why you're going.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up the word sacrifice, and I was hoping it would come up because, one of the things I really want folks listening to understand is, maybe you do have it within you to be the GOAT at anything in life, but you're not going to do it without that sacrifice. It
Yep.
doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what a natural you are. It takes the sacrifice. You got to put in the blood. And, I'm sure that there's times where you're just questioning why. Like, do you ever get cranky with each other on December 14th when you're driving back from wherever the heck you've been?
Let's just say that there are certain contests that we leave, and the first hour of the drive might be a quiet one, right? Depending if the other person did well or didn't. The sad thing is, if I did well and Sandy didn't, I can't celebrate my success, or I can't celebrate her success because I did really bad. And all I want to know is the scores. That's all I ask her. Give me the scores, and I'm going to go down the road. And I talked about logic earlier. And if I had scores or whatever they were, I'm just going to go and say, why did I get a 47 in Dundas, or why did I get a 49 in texture, and stuff like that. So, and whatever you do, don't blame the judges, right? They're all volunteers out there. They're there to help us out. We can't do this sport without them. But, what could you have done different, in that logic you're looking at to make that 47 become a 50?
So you saw this comment from Elizabeth. Amen. Congratulations, Elizabeth, on being champion.
2 times.
2024.
She beat my record by 1 point.
How about that?
If someone was going to beat my record, I'm glad it was her.
Huge accomplishment.
All right. So Elizabeth clearly doesn't need it, but guys, what advice would you give to someone who's kind of struggling to get that first bit of success to, get the energy to get up and keep going? What would you tell them?
I would, look at Kirk Maltzer this last weekend. He won the shed, on Saturday night on the Stake B, I think it was, right? So we competed with Kirk, got to know him this year, or maybe a little bit last year. Came from the barbecue world, and now all of a sudden is going into the steak world. And he had one other top 10 call this year, and he's been going to contest after contest. And we obviously talk and share secrets. I know anybody knows me, I'm willing to share any of my knowledge, when I can and I have time, as long as it doesn't disrupt what we're doing. And, give it to Kurt. He just kept hanging in there, and away he went. So try to hang in there, learn what you can, ask people. The SCA is all about family, and they're very friendly with you. 99% of the people will share at least some advice with you.
It's such good advice. And as Brian and I were thinking about this conversation, I think we both remembered, like, how many times has Tim drawn a high stake pick number where he's picking last or second to last or something. And what does he do when that happens? He just turns that around and knocks it out of the park. Like,
no, I complain a little bit.
Yeah, he complains.
He complains until he gets the steak.
Well, he knocks it out of the park.
And then he knocks it out of the park, and then I have to remind him.
Yeah.
Or when he's pouting about it, I'm like, how many times have you won from the back?
Yeah.
But do you find a great steak somehow, or do you just make that work? What goes on there?
So the one thing I tell everybody, if people run down that table of steaks and they don't flip steaks over, and some of the ugliest steaks turn out to be the best steak. And, take the time and have that person that's turning the steaks for you, take a look at them, because there's an ugly duckling on the other side, and it just needs to be trimmed up. And, I probably toot my own horn, but I definitely can trim a steak, and I can take a bad looking steak and try to make it a good steak, but turn those steaks over and see what they are on the other side.
What's the first criteria you must have for that steak to go with you in the Tupperware?
A spinalis. Any type of spinalis. No spinalis. Like steak number 10 through 13, it's not going to win you a contest.
Yeah, well, I know those are tough. I think tomorrow or the next day, Ann and I are going to practice, and we've got a 12 and a 5. So someone's going to struggle.
And that's one of the things that I want to say with, with Tim picking from the back quite often, is he's learned to trim placement of steak, manipulate that steak type, change the shape of it. But he's learned how to cook bad looking steaks, because you're
key.
not, we all, like, Tim has his Tim steak and I have my steak that I like, but you don't get that all the time. And what you have to do, and especially those people who are just starting out, a big advice I get is go to Sam's Club, go to Costco, wherever you're getting your meats, and just pick a pack, right? Don't do steak selection. We always say it's a great place to do steak selection, but almost pick your pack and cook those types of steaks. Because especially now coming up with Worlds, right? A lot of us are practicing. We typically don't practice. We're going to be practicing for Worlds. Yeah, I'm going to, like my 3-cut steak, he's going to like his 5, but we're going to practice on 9s and 10s, because that could happen. And you have to learn how to adjust that.
Yeah. And Sandy, something that you shared with me long ago, and I think of this all the time, you helped me with the notion of envisioning your finished product from the very beginning as you're doing steak selection. Like, I now can envision how that steak on the table, how I want it to appear, and how I can be in control of it, because I'm a total control freak at every step of the way, when I'm trimming, when I'm cooking, when I'm boxing, to get it exactly placed the way that I want. So it's such good advice.
Yeah. I mean, we always, when we're looking at our steaks, Spinalis is always closest to us. We are looking at it the way the judges are looking at it. You'll also see, if you've ever been at a contest with me and we start lining up for steak selection, and if they have the cooks walking on the loin side, you'll hear me say, hey, can we switch the side of the table? I want to walk down the Spinalis side. It's not a rule, but that's the way the judges are going to be looking at it. That's the way I want to be looking at, the steaks in there. I do want to go back to one thing of, we set our goals, and I think for new cooks, right, an end goal, I think every steak cook's goal should be that world championship, right? I think that should be a goal on everybody's list. Again, if you're competing, that should be on your list. But set off sometimes small goals. Winning a U.S. championship your first year is really tough. Elizabeth Lippa did it. But most people, think about it, like, hey, I want a top 10 call. Yep. I want that first place. I want to be first in my region. I want to be first in my state, right? They now have, like, Tim and I love stats, right? On the SCA points spreadsheet, you could see where you are in the state. So that might be a goal. Like, that was one of my goals for ancillaries, be number 1 in Illinois. There's 5 ancillary cooks, so I thought I could make it. But start off, but set those goals. And if you achieve those goals early in the season, guess what?
Make new goal.
Make a new goal. Up that goal, type of thing.
I think absolutely. I mean, we've talked a lot about the mindset of winning, and a big part of that, and you guys have touched on it here and there, is the role of flavor in winning. Yep. So this is Factory Team Flavor Talk. So obviously we want to talk about the flavors a little bit in the time that we have remaining. And, when you're cooking competitions to win, obviously the food's got to taste good, right? But there's more to it than that, for sure. As Brian and I, again, were preparing, we thought about the times when we've, had food that was totally awesome in competitions, or so we thought, only to take the leftovers, home to our friends, our family, and they're raving about it, so much, but yet it bombed in food sport. So what's your philosophy on flavor as one of those dimensions when it comes
to flavor for competition? What's that?
Flavor for competition is, in the SCA world, you have 5 judges. And you have to please 5 judges, or I'm going to say not offend 5 judges, right? I think, that's that case. So, right. So that's our mindset of not offending any one of those judges. So we always want a balanced profile. And by the way, it's called the Steak Cookoff Association. It should taste like steak, not like seasoning. I don't want a judge to open up, to cut that steak and say, oh, they used that new Texas Tornado. Oh, they used spicy white lightning. Like, I don't want them to be able to tell exactly which seasoning we have used. I want them to say, man, that was a really good steak. It tasted like steak, right?
So no blues hog on that?
No blues hog.
No, now at home maybe on a pork chop, but actually neon lights on pork
Oh.
chops, New Aces Wild.
We just helped a new
sauce.
little girl from Florida the other day. She won the
She won the
shed.
kids pork chop, but we always want a balanced flavor, and we want it to taste like steak, like beef,
Like beef.
type of thing. And we started off again, kind of even with our KCBS recipes, very basic. A couple of rubs. We're successful early on with not a crazy number of rubs. Like we just had a good balance. And as the years have progressed and there's more and more steak seasonings coming out, like when we started, there wasn't a whole lot of just branded for the steak world, right? We all used our barbecue stuff, right? And now there's a lot of crossover too, but there's more and more, I think, steak seasonings that are coming out. And there's some great ones. And we'll taste them, but we'll see, okay, well, how does it work with our seasoning, right? Because sometimes we might add it to a butter. We might add it to the marinade. We might add it to the finishing. We very rarely add extra flavoring to our base steak rubs, right? And our base steak rubs have been our base steak rubs almost from day one.
Right there is a huge insight. Flavor is not limited to the products that you put on the steak from a shaker and a bottle of rub or seasoning. You talked about marinades, you talked about butter, you talked about all these other ways to deploy flavor throughout that whole experience.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I'm going to say even charcoal.
Right. Charcoal.
Type of thing. Charcoal. Add wood to it. Don't add wood to it. Type of thing. And it's all of those. And what we'll say even, kind of in our class is when people give us new rubs all the time, like, hey, taste this. Well, if you taste a rub straight out of a shaker, it tastes one way. You cook it, it tastes differently. You add it to butter, it tastes different. You add it in a thumb grinder, it tastes different. So it's kind of learning that, hey, it tastes different in different aspects, and where does it fit, type of deal with it. And I will say, Tim and I don't have great palates, type of thing.
Tell you when I don't like it.
Yeah, he can tell when you don't like, but he can't say, oh, this has rosemary or something in there, right? He one time told a very successful brisket guy, he goes, I think you have like orange or something citrusy in there. There was none. So I go out and I look at, to be honest with your flavor guide.
Yep.
Even when I'm cooking at home, I'm making things and this new rub came out, like Bill Mann has a great line of rubs and it's like, okay, how does this rate, type of thing. And we look at it, but it's not, we listen to what people are calling out for rubs, right? And then you also have to look, okay, are they really using 20 rubs that they're calling out? Type of thing. And then we'll taste it, and I'm like, okay, well, I like this. There was a rub that I really didn't like out of the bottle, but when you put it on a steak, it tastes totally different. And I'm like, hey, this is pretty good. Didn't make our profile, but okay. I can
so how did you guys land on the OG, the one that's really kind of the seminal rub that you guys continue to use?
It was a little bit of brisket. And then one of our very first class that we took for SCA was Johnny Joseph's class, right? We were very, Tim said we went to an event in Minnesota and Johnny was there. I just thought he was a very loud mouth with neon shirt going on. I had no idea who he was. And then we realized, oh, that's Johnny Joseph. Like, ooh, that's like a legend. And so he was, I think I called him the myth. He was like the myth, the legend. And then he became a teacher, for us. And he taught us, there was a lot in that first class that he taught us about flavor and balance and everything. And like I said, we just, I will actually say we probably got lucky on that. We got a really good balanced rub to start with. Over the years, though, we have been very fortunate to be part of the Team White Lightning Boars Night Out.
And now Ace is Wild.
And Ace is Wild, and they have some amazing palates, those guys. And so they'll be coming out with new rubs and stuff, and they're like, hey, taste this, try this. So, you know, my nuclear case with spices has expanded over the years. We're not only 3, but it's just been fun to play with.
Yeah, I'd say we're
always goes back to the basics. We did a taste test the beginning of this year with a friend of ours who's a chef. He's not part of the SCA world. And we did 3 steaks blind as 3 very different profiles. And all 3 of us went back to our original and said, this is it.
Yeah. I think we're also very fortunate that Boars Night and Aces Wild trust us to prototype some of their new products. You know, so over the last 4 years, we've been very fortunate to help bring like Spicy White Lightning, Midwest Dust, Wicked Pig, even with Matt, to bring it to market.
Southern Thunder and
Texas Tornado, and then also the new 4 Queens, and you know, some of that kind of stuff. So we're very fortunate that we get to prototype some of those ahead of time and just find out, can we use them in our profile or not? And so we've been successful there.
So you've obviously dropped a bunch of names there, and I just want to throw in for anyone listening who's not a competition cook, you know, maybe they just tuned in because they're interested in steak and wanted to learn a bit more about that. I got to tell you, the Johnny Joseph rub, even though it's really kind of known as a competition rub, get some of that and put it on your steak. I think the guy must have worked a lifetime on making that, because it's a masterpiece.
Mushrooms.
It was originally his pork rub, so we use it on chicken and mushrooms all the time.
Yeah.
And the other one is Midwest Dust. Do you have that, Ann? You have that in front of you? Midwest Dust.
Come on, walk over there and get it.
No.
Reach behind me, maybe.
But we made chicken tonight. And
A476. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. But I had Midwest Dust on the chicken tonight. I mean, it's just awesome, you know. So,
Yeah,
so it's not just like Brian just said. It's not just for steak. It's use them in your kitchen, use them in your backyard.
Yeah, and I don't really believe in the idea of competition rubs anymore. I mean, if it means anything, it probably means it's got maybe a little more sugar in it and some MSG that they wouldn't have at the grocery store. But man, that's where so much R&D goes into, is how to make something truly great. At the grocery store, a lot of the R&D is how do we make it truly cheap so we can make the most profit on it. So you get a lot of fillers and things like that. But the competition rubs, I think you're going to get in the full bill of ingredients more real stuff that actually adds to flavor. And so spend your money there. Don't mess with the stuff at the grocery store.
So are there any common flavor mistakes or mishaps or redirects that you think folks into competition food sport should avoid?
Too salty.
So I was going to say, that's what I was saying.
I think that's number 1.
We're fortunate. We know some judges from the various regions, and you know, you just get to sit around. Like the other night, we were down there, and I just happened to say, "Hey, how are the steaks from last night?" And 2 of them right off the bat said they were too salty. The majority were too salty. You know, so
because people don't think about theirs, right? So I'm just gonna say, I always recommend people who are there, whether they're doing steaks at home, starting with competition, I always say you always want to start with some type of salt, pepper, garlic base. I call it a white rub, type of thing. And then like some type of red rub that's going to give it more color and flavor and so forth. Both of those rubs have salt in it. And then we say, hey, you might want to have a finishing, rub with that. That's going to have salt in it. And then you want to finish it with some butter. We always use unsalted butter, right? Because if you use salted butter, now you're adding another layer of butter. And again, it goes back to how does it taste on its own, but how is it going to taste layered with everything else? But I think making steaks too salty is probably what we hear the most from judges.
If it's 95 degrees in Texas, the body craves salt. Go ahead and use salt, but not when it's -0 outside right now. Don't have a lot of salt.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, do you guys adjust based on like maybe what the weather is, or whether it's hot, or whether you're turning in early or late in the window? Does any of that factor into how you play the flavor game?
For the most part, no. I will say in 2020, we were cooking a lot in Texas. and Texas likes a little bit more spicy, bold. And again, we think our flavor profile is really balanced. And when we first started cooking, we actually cooked on the same grill. So Tim cooked early in the window, I cooked late in the window, and now we cook on our own grills, and we tend to still do that. But I noticed in Texas, and I'm not going to say worlds, that's a different story, but competitions with Texas judges, bold flavors. When I was going in at the end of the window, I probably was heavier handed with my seasoning. Same seasonings, but I probably added more to it than I usually did, just because I knew there was probably a lot of bold flavors before mine.
And Sandy, you made a point to talk about not talking about worlds, but what if we were talking about worlds?
Worlds, yes.
Up in March.
It's in Texas.
It's a hybrid of judges.
But you have judges from all over, including international judges. So you have judges from Texas. You have them from Iowa, from Alaska. You're going to have judges from Europe. We had judges, I think, from Australia. From the East Coast, you're going to have judges from everywhere. So I don't treat it as a Texas comp. You know, like there's a comp a couple days before Worlds in Texas. And by the way, I always go and look to see who's judging. When you sign up as a cook and you go to the SCA website, you could see the cooks, but you could also go to the judges area and you could see who's signed up to judge. So if we were going to cook that Texas event before Worlds, I'd probably go and look to see who's judging and go, okay, is it a mix of judges? The Shed, we were just at the Shed. I think the one day they had 66 judges. Yep. Well, I know there were like 8 from Iowa, Wisconsin judges that were there, right? So the Shed is a good mix of judges.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I don't treat Worlds as a Texas cook. Texas in the sense of weather, what's down there, but not judge-wise.
Gotcha. Well, let's try. I want to do something else real quick. So at a SCA competition, part of the game is you got to pick a steak off the table, and you got roughly 30 seconds to do that. So, Jeff, I got a picture to share. You're going to have to let me throw it up on stage there if you can. And we'll let Tim and Sandy each pick a steak from.
Hey, I know that picture.
Yep, that should be a familiar picture. And what we've got here, folks, and I'll let them look them over while I'm describing it. This is what I call an end-to-end. So that's the whole darn ribeye roast, deboned and cut into, what do we got there? 11, it looks like. Yep. Yeah, 11. So that's pretty typically what you're going to see, except at a real competition, they're going to give you 2 more that are absolute garbage and you can never win with. So, Tim, you'll go last as usual. Sandy, which one are you picking and why?
I am picking
top row.
The top row, the third one, the middle one.
From the left.
Well, it's either way, either way, or in the middle. I'm either picking 2 or 3.
Okay, and why?
So
what attracts you to those?
The top left will be number 1. That was number 1 in the loin. So when we talk numbers, that's cut, right? So I'm doing a 2 or 3. I would have asked to flip it over. I am looking at marbling. I'm first looking at the marbling of the spinalis, because that's where the judges are going to eat from, and I want to make sure that's good. I don't want, if possible, a really heavy fat line. I like fat, but I don't want a heavy fat line through it because the plastic knife has to cut through it, and that might be tough to do. So you get ding-done texture.
Is that probably what's going to decide between 2 or 3 is what you're seeing in that top part of the steak?
Yeah. And again, because this was.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me fix that for you.
You know what's really funny? Right. So this is a picture that Tim and I took. I actually took because you could actually see my feet in flip-flops on top. And I took it backwards for some reason. I always talk about the spinalis, and for some reason that picture's backwards. So I was looking at it backwards. So the bottom row, I'm looking at the fat. I'm looking at the shape of the eye of how I'm going to trim it. So 2 or 3. I've probably been trying to do a little bit smaller tries lately. So I would probably do cut number 3.
All right, Tim, how about you?
All right. The old Tim would have done the bottom row, left-hand steak.
This guy right here?
Yep. And then the top row, right-hand steak. Those are what we call Tim steak. That's number 5, number 6 off the loin. I'm now kind of leaning more towards number 4 on the bottom. So that's where. So that's what I've been cooking of late. Where I get myself in trouble and I don't get called, I start going after steaks number 2 and number 1, thinking, oh, I can cook those. I can cook anything, right? Wrong. So I catch myself, but I'm not going to leave a well-marbled steak laying on the table. So let's talk a little bit about why I wouldn't pick a steak, right, to help a little bit of people. But if you take the top row, the 4th one from the left, right? One more back there, Brian, right? So when I look at that steak, it's got a spinalis, right? We could win with that. But if you look at the right-hand side of that, where it's going to come down to appearance, on that top, a lot of fat up there. And you're not going to be able to cut your way out of that, right? I can't trim that out of that. So you always have to think, like Sandy alluded to earlier, and Ann, I think you talked about it, is envisioning that steak, what it's going to look like going on the grill and what the turn-in is. So always take and put something on that to look at that top half, what's going to be your appearance. That fat's going to show up in your appearance, even right through that middle of that cut line. Now, you might be able to twist a little bit to the right, to get some of it, but you're going to be in a little bit of a trouble on that one. So that's where I would stay away from that one.
What makes this one so hard?
To me, this one comes down to what I call the cutter. And so you don't know how that steak goes into that. So if you look at this has the spinalis, which is the bottom, the spinalis, fat cap, ribeye cap. It also has a third muscle there. It's called the complexus muscle, or the nickname in the SCA is called the triheart, right?
This guy right here?
Yep. And then if you look at the loin, the eye of the loin to the left of that, those 2 pieces of meat are going to cook differently, right? They're going to come to a different thing. So the judges are instructed to take out the 2 loins that might have the cut coming across. The one that meets the doneness the most is what they're supposed to be using. But if that complexus muscle is on the rare side and the other one got a little bit more done, it's a tough choice. And the other thing is when the cutter cuts that, how much of that triheart's going to stay in there or not, and so it might require a second cut. So if you look at that one, that's a Jeff Jacobson steak all day long. He's going to cook that every time, and he's going to kick your butt with it, right? but he knows how to cook that. I don't know how to cook that. You hear a lot of people talk about trihearts. Oh, there was this big try, and I went for it. Well, make sure you know how to cook that steak. That's all I can say.
So good advice. Make sure you know how to cook it. I mean, I don't cook the tries. I wouldn't pick that. I know Brian would, but that's not my steak. I think that's good advice. We are over time. So
sorry.
No. The good old wrap up and what's next.
Yeah. Let's do a little bit of a wrap up there. And I think, wow, thank you guys. That was a lot of great information, a lot of great insight. We've talked a lot about your journey, the winning mindset. I try to channel you guys every step of the way. I consider you both my steak mentors, like I do Darren Worth, my barbecue mentor. So lot to learn from you guys. Thank you so much. I'm curious if you can share, where can people follow along on your journey, get more information from you guys, or maybe sign up for a future steak class. You want to tell us about that?
Sure. I'm going to say we're not super great on our social media, but we're on Facebook at Stress Relief BBQ. We're on Instagram, more Facebook than Instagram. We are not on X, formerly known as Twitter, or TikTok. So we're also each have our separate pages, Sandy Bull Brown or Tim Brown. We have coming up, back by popular demand, we're doing some classes. We used to do classes kind of a couple places around the country. Last year, we had a lot of requests from overseas, from the Europeans, that they wanted a class. So we did a class, actually 2 classes in Fort Worth last year, right before the World Championship. And so back by popular demand, we are doing it again this year. We're doing it Wednesday night. And then we're doing it Thursday morning. I talked to Ken about when load-in is going to be on Thursday morning. He thinks it's going to start around 7. We're going to do class starting at 10. It's going to be about 5 minutes north of the Texas Motor Speedway, so really close to so you could do load-in and then come to the class. If you want more information about the class, please message us. Go out to our Facebook page. I did right before this call. I did post a flyer on it. And that's kind of where we're going with our classes. And yeah.
So
I'd
go
like
to Facebook, search for stress relief, and they'll find you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to end with this very amazing long comment from Joe, who shared this earlier in the broadcast, and I was kind of waiting for the right time. And I think this just says a lot about you guys both, how you are generous with the new people that you meet and you share information, you encourage folks, you're helpful to newbies and experienced folks alike. And can't wait to see Joe compete at Worlds and everybody else. So thank you both so much for all the insight that you've shared. Brian, any parting thoughts from you?
Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Tim and Sandy, can't wait to see you at Worlds. I have a feeling it's going to be one of y'all's year this year, but Ms. Freak thinks it's her year too, and I think it's mine, and that's what it's all about.
Hey,
Having that goal
Four-way
and go
tie.
get it.
There's a full moon. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh,
There you go.
No.
He's howling.
Well, good night, everybody, and thanks to tuning in to Flavor Talk. We'll see you next month.
All right.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks, guys.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.